Hey guys, Tracy Pelfrey here. This is part 2, a continuation of Erik Meeks asking me some questions about myself. And this one is going to pick up exactly where the first one ended. And so here's Brian wanting to understand while he's stationed in New York and decided, I think Ashmore told me, that there was a church at Fort Drum. And Reverend King, Roy King, right? He's the one who would lead services sometimes in Graham.
I don't even know him.
Oh, okay. Well, he was such a nice man. And he and his wife weren't there long at that serviceman's home before. But Brian was like, "Oh, they're just really special people. They're really sweet. They're really nice." So, this started to solidify things. This was before the keys came. So, I'm in the Philippines with the Ashmores. He was trying to get to Fort Drum whenever he could from Griffiths. And then Otto came up there. Cheryl Polk, the Polks in California, she used to be married to him, to Otto. So Otto is a single guy at the serviceman's home. I don't know if he had a helper then, but so Brian really liked him too. And this just helped solidify everything. And we were talking about Bible school and stuff. So when he got out of the Air Force to come over to the Philippines, just before that, he went home to visit family. In the meantime, Richard Blumenthal and his wife came to the Philippines to take over the pastorate. And we were so happy. We were like, we don't care who it is. We are over the keys. And when the Blumenthals came, he had been around. We knew he'd been around for a long time. We heard from the Keys. And he was like a protege of Davis. And he was the protege before Dennis became one. So Blumenthal comes over to the Philippines. We're all excited that we're going to have revival and things are going to change. And he did. He came in like a house on fire, but different than the Ashmores. His wife was very nice and all. We moved into a new, bigger home not long after he got there. Things became very lively and everything, but they became very controlling too. And he was so far up Davis's butt. I can look back now and see all the ways that not only had the Keys introduced the boot camp way of the Bible school in the local church, which wasn't supposed to happen, but it did all the time. And then Blumenthal was a good preacher. There was great excitement over the Blumenthal's arrival, imminent arrival. And so we were really pumped that there was going to be some sort of revival. We figured there had to be for someone to be coming over to replace the Keys, because that to us was a huge answer to prayer. And I really believe that several of us, if it had gone on much longer without somebody else, we would have left. So here we were poised for some great revival to be taking place just because the Blumenthals were coming over to take over. As if God can't do it with a stray dog off the street there in the Philippines and do whatever he wants, right? But no, there has to be the conduit of a great man of God. And so the day of their arrival, a few of us were going to tag along with the Keys down to Manila. I forget how far of a drive it was. You're not talking about normal freeway roads or vehicles or anything. And so that morning we had to leave by a certain time. And so I had to bring my car off base and park it at the serviceman's home there on that side street. Mick's car was already in the driveway, so I parked on the street. It wasn't ideal, but I wanted to be able to go. I don't remember all the particulars, but we were driving in a covered, not a jeepney, but it wasn't a regular car. And so we drove down to Manila. We met the Blumenthals, brought them to wherever they were staying, I think, overnight. And then we went back. So we were talking with them in the car and we were hearing what their plans were. You know, that had to be hard for them. That had to be annoying probably because jet lag is such a real thing when you're flying from the States. You don't know if you're a day ahead or a day back or what's going on. So we get back to the serviceman's home pretty late that night and my car isn't there. And we're looking around. Like, I know I parked my car here. And we were looking at some of the Filipino neighbors around. They were just looking at us like, they acted like they didn't know anything. Okay. I think you do, because you're very nosy and you watch everything. But they also may have been afraid to say something. So we called the security police on base and they came off because there were agreements with the base. So if you lived off base and there was an issue, there had to be present American security police and local police, so-called. And they came out and I was in shock, I think, that my car was gone. But I saw the looks on the security police. And they thought we were weird because we were rejoicing that my car had been stolen and we were going to have revival. And clearly this was ushering it in. It's bananas. The car that I learned to drive a stick on that had fiercest cold air conditioning on the planet and was blacked out. It could go pretty fast. It was a Toyota Crown, which they didn't even send to the United States. Like, we weren't even worthy to have that car. I bought it off of some guy in my squadron, and it was a big help. It was a big help. And here it was gone. And we just thought, oh, the devil's fighting because we want to have revival. So ridiculous. No, what happened was, and they even said it to me that the police, that they got your car. We talked to some people in the neighborhood and they saw people come, and they take it so fast that probably within a half an hour it was already broken down and being sold for parts. And so, you know, you're like, I can't even believe this. So a girl in my squadron who had actually come out to church when the Ashmores were there, she had a second car and she let me borrow it. It was some old Ford thing and didn't have air conditioning, but you didn't care because if you get off base and get around. And so this is how we initiated or christened the arrival of the Blumenthals. It was like, oh, the devil's fighting and he stole Tracy's car. And it's so silly. The things that you assign everything to. It's just so silly. But I was able to use that car to drive the Blumenthals around like a little taxi service and all. And while I brought them back to their place one day after they got settled in, this was before we had a newer serviceman's home. They were staying not in the serviceman's home where the keys were, obviously, because there was no room. Well, they could have had the room they wanted to pawn off on Howard Geyer, the one with no window and no ability to air condition it, but they didn't want that. So I was sitting and talking to them and sharing some things about myself. They were asking me some questions. And then when we got up in the next Bible study or service, he said some things based on some stuff I said. And afterwards, I asked him, I said, why didn't you just convey those thoughts to me while I was sitting right there? And he said, well, because it's beneficial for other people to hear it too. And my acceptance of that lame reasoning set the framework. It set the whole foundation for my accepting it when I got to the Bible school. And that's what constantly came over the pulpit from Davis and Keckle and Olson and in the classes. So you are conditioned, desensitized, so that feeling you had at first, that gut feeling that this is weird. Why wouldn't you just talk to me? I was just right there. Why would you instead take something personal I shared, bring it over the pulpit, and then humiliate me, and then say you're using it so others benefit as well? That's an NTCC tactic. That is not biblical. That is not what you find in a loving fellowship of people that does not have a professional ministry, corporate wonk leader. And then Davis came over for a visit by himself. His wife wasn't with him. And, we'd heard about him as if he was God Almighty on earth and in physical form. To say that expectations were high is an understatement. Especially the Keys. They were one of those people that like wee-weed themselves over talking about him like little puppies. And Blumenthal.
What do you think it was? What do you think it was about him? That was it just that everyone had somehow gotten brainwashed, or did he have such a dynamic character?
He didn't. That's
the
interesting thing. He was just forceful in his words and everything. And, something I was thinking about last night was people would say things about him like, he'll just sit there and look at you like he's looking right through you, like he knows your thoughts. And now I can look back and say, no, he was a ignorant hick who plagiarized most of what he did, but he knew enough about human behavior. That's why Keckle can tell when people in his congregation are not with him anymore, because the look that you have of a obedient follower, that light fades out, and you don't have that anymore. And I think Davis had that spot on. But he came over, and Blumenthal was just at his side, and, oh, Pastor, okay, we got to get this for Pastor, and all this has to be just right. They brought up some Filipinos from the Bible school down in Cagayan de Oro. It was a husband and wife, and then a single lady. And for those who have ever been to the Philippines, it was Bibi and Toto. And I believe the young lady's name, was it Shirley? I don't know why Shirley comes to mind, but it does. To be in the home helping, like a houseboy and a house girl. And I thought, okay, Howard's in the home living here. Who else? I don't even think there was anyone else living in the home. Maybe one other guy, maybe. It was a big home, but what's everybody doing? What do you have? So when they came, I didn't understand it because I felt like they were almost like servants.
Mm-hmm.
And here they had supposedly been through the school and all, so I didn't know why maybe he never preached. So when Davis came over, I'm watching this spectacle of Blumenthal running around like he's somebody. And I didn't read in my Bible anything about elevating men like that. And so that was confusing to me.
As a matter of fact, it says, called no man teacher, for you have one teacher, even God. It says, and called no man father, for you have one father. And what that's basically talking about is what you just explained, to where don't elevate a person to that level that God should be.
That's exactly right. That's why now when I looked up, it took me a long time to look up the word reverend. I was like, oh my God, what are they using that word for? It's one place in the Bible, and it does not refer to a man. And there was no like Pastor Matthew, Pastor Mark, Reverend Luke. Where did all that come from? We knew their first names. We didn't even know their last
Yes.
names. And well, I don't recall knowing their last name, but so here comes Davis, and he's just treated like royalty. So much so that the first night that we had fellowship we were in this new home. It was quite big, and there was a dining room area with a big table and chairs, and then a kitchen off of that, and we were all in there, the ladies, cooking and stuff. It was so hot, no air conditioning. They're like frying bananas and stuff and brown sugar and oil. I was like, why would you choose this? I'll go get ice cream at the commissary. We'll each have a half gallon, something. This is not pleasant at all. But the Filipino ladies, they were from the school. They brought a few of us ladies over, and they were like, okay, we want to show you how you have to make pastor's coffee. It has to be this brand of coffee, and you have to put this much in it, and it has to be this hot. And I just was like, what is happening? What is happening here?
Well,
I've not heard that about anybody. Nobody.
That's way different from the instant coffee that you were having with the Ashmores.
Well, it was still instant coffee, but it had to be a certain kind. It had to be a certain kind. It had to be so many tablespoons level. I mean, it was like, what are we in a chemist kitchen here, getting it just right? It's so crazy. While she was doing that, showing us that, the big man is sitting out alone in the living room area on a couch, facing perpendicular to the rest of us, just looking out, just sitting as a contemplative man of God. And when Gene Keys, the Keys were still there, they hadn't left yet. Gene came out of the kitchen and said, Pastor, would you like a piece of cake? And he said, I don't like cake, I like pie. Just without even looking at her, he just set it out to the empty room in front of him. And all of us that were there, like, you just felt like this time, like you see in movies sometimes, everybody just stops for a second. Like a glitch in the Matrix or something. Like, what was that? Is that real? We're learning about his coffee, and he doesn't like this. It's so unappreciative of these women who were literally sweating bullets in that kitchen for this guy, and put out all kinds of goodies. I don't know. I don't know. And I don't think Brian was there yet. Or was he? No, he might have been. No, he was there. He was there already. In fact, prior to Brian coming, so the Blumenthals had just gotten to the Philippines. We were in a new little church building, but at least it had air conditioning. It was like a storefront. And Brian was flying in on a day where we had church that night. And so I said to the Reverend Blumenthal, well, I'm going to pick Brian up this afternoon at the air terminal, and then, we'll see you tomorrow whenever. He's like, no, you'll be in church tonight. So we haven't seen each other for a year or more. And what men and women who are married and haven't seen each other in a while do. And no, he was not going to allow that. And we just went along with it. And it was still a thing then where the women sat on one side and the men on the other. So I couldn't even sit next to the dude. I had to be just across the room.
And he was going for that?
What's that?
I said, and he was fine with all that. He was going with all of it?
I don't even remember at the time what the deal was. If he was just like excited to, experience the whole thing, to be back in the Philippines, to see what was going on.
Yeah.
Because the things we talked about when we were dating was things like being missionaries somewhere. And we would look up different places around the world. I think one of the places was Malta, which is an island off of Italy. And there's so many people there, and how many are all Catholic and all. And we would be praying for these places. And that was one of the places we thought we'd want to go maybe one day. And so you're excited because you think this is a church that has a Bible school that sends people out to reach the world. It's sort of like what Michaela was saying and everybody else, is that you have this sense that you're going to really be a part of something. And it's the thing, the driving factor that keeps you staying. Even that red flag with Davis was so big, I think he was waving it himself. Like, I'm a red flag. I'm a huge red flag sitting over here demanding pie. Drinking the coffee the way I like it. And we all were stunned by it. You could just see it, everybody's faces. But what did we do? So when I hear Keckles say things like, oh, you can leave anytime you want, and coercion and all is a physical thing. No, he doesn't know anything. That guy knows squat. If he picked up one book about...
No, that's the thing. He knows.
Yeah, that's true.
He makes up his own terms. He
you're
changes
right.
the definition of words.
Yes, you're right. You're right. That's true. That is very true. He does know. He doesn't want to admit it to his followers.
Yes. See, and I think it's a really good point you made, that it basically, it's like you felt like you were a part of something. And one thing that when I was attending there were people who saw all the same stuff you saw and experienced, and they're just like, this is not right. But when I would ask them, hey, why are you still here if you see all this? And basically they explained it to where it comes down to this. Because NTCC is an organization, and it's already, like, it already has a foundation. They already have churches everywhere. It's basically, you're using their platform that is already made for you. And so it makes things easier. It gives you more confidence to go out and do it instead of going out on your own. Like, if you felt that God called you to preach, people do it all the time. You can go out on your own and start a church.
Exactly.
But it's because the platform that they're providing for you, it appeals.
Well, it has to be people that maybe haven't done it, because I dare say that once you do leave and you go out, especially looking back now, so much more could be done not tied to an organization that's really about real estate, that takes the tax exempt status from the government, being a part of this organization that you can't do anything on your own, really. You have to send them a percentage of your tithe. Why? So people would do better.
Now, as far as all these other people, Davis, Keckle, Henson, all of them, do you think that, or we'll say with Davis, do you think that he was misguided? Do you think he was right? Do you think he started off genuine and then it kind of just went left and he just kind of went with it? Like, do you think that when he made this place, it was like he had a diabolical plan to make money and basically make slaves out of congregation?
Well, here's the thing. I think this is just my humble opinion based on knowledge I know that's out there in the public and that has been shared with me, but not just shared by one person, by multiple people. He was an adulterer. He was an absolute adulterer. And he broke off from another organization. He made it about outward holiness standards or whatever. Like they weren't strict enough, and now we're going to do it the right way. And
that's what
basically if you set yourself up as being the man of God before the throne of God, I'm sorry, that's it. All bets are off. That's it. You're wrong. But I don't know what he said to people in those early days, but clearly there was control exerted. And even as far as Dennis, Blumenthal, who was my preacher for a while over in the Philippines, not for too long, because they killed 2 Americans outside of the base in it was May 1990, and I think right after that, the organization pulled the preachers out of there for safety. But Blumenthal was Davis's protege, and looking back now, I can just see it. And I can see how he treated Davis as like the all-knowing elder statesman in God. But he exerted the same kind of control over the rest of us, controlling our lives and controlling what we did. When he left and went up to Okinawa, we sent that dude our tithe, because he sent back once a week, maybe, or once every 2 weeks, a cassette tape of his preaching on it from one service. This had to have been the end of 1990, very beginning of 1991, because when I was pregnant with my first daughter, I had flown up to Okinawa to visit with the Ashmores in service and to meet all the brethren there. So it had to be sometime after that the Blumenthals went up there. And so that was our reason to have to send him our tithe.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So he was getting the tithe from us, from all of us. And when he left and there was no church there, we were just told, well, just do the best you can, go on base, whatever, which we all did. And then at our house and the Lloyd Owens became almost like little mini servicemen's homes. And so we just had the brethren over all the time. We had prayer meetings there in our houses. Some were quite loud. And the I don't know if you call them like a townhome style, because they were 2 floors. They were going to be tearing them down because they were old. But once they killed those 2 Americans during the base renewal talks, the lease agreement talks, and they were just trying to get all of us that were living off base on base. They were throwing up prefabricated housing everywhere, shoving us into these older buildings that were scheduled for demolition, which is quite ironic because they ended up getting demolished when Mount Pinatubo blew just after we left in 1991. So for a while we didn't have any neighbors, so everybody was loud. It would be upstairs, downstairs, just during prayer meetings. If we were all gathered together, we shared holidays together and all baked and cooked, and the single ladies and guys would come over, and if they wanted to use the kitchen and bake or cook or something, they could do that. So it was very special times without the overbearing pastors around. And I wish I had taken that lesson with me at some point. But you were made to feel dependent upon the self-appointed men of God. We had people over all the time, just sitting around either listening to one of the tapes of Blumenthal or just fellowshipping. And I often wonder, what was it during that time when there was no heavy influence of NTCC there? Why did we still go back? I think it had to do with the mere fact that a bunch of us, were desirous to go to the Bible school. And the beautiful thing was, it reminded me of the days before NTCC when I was at Clark Air Base, because we would all go together on base to the chapel. We would meet other Christians and invite them over too for a fellowship. And it was just beautiful. It was just beautiful times now that I'm really remembering it, as far as no angst over, oh, what's the preacher going to say? Is he going to run my new friends off? Is he going to condemn them to hell because she's got ladies' slacks on, or his hair isn't in a 50s style? Those were quite liberating times.
Is Blumenthal still in the organization?
Oh, no. No, so he went up to Okinawa. Then we had gone to school, let's see, I got stationed in Florida. I had to leave in just before Mount Pinatubo blew in the Philippines. So I left like April 1991. And I went to South Florida. South of Miami was Homestead Air Force Base. That got wiped out by a hurricane after we left there. And we were there from May until January, when we drove across country to go to school. I had my daughter Rachel in November, the end of November, and we were driving on the road in January, stupidly. So I often wonder too, why after those months away, we were sending money towards our tuition to the school, like we were going, but we just, for some reason, we felt like that's where we had to go and what we had to do. And so even during our times away from the preachers, we still felt the call to go there. And I think that's what takes over after a while, Erik, is maybe, well, if you say that's the call of God on your life to go there, then to not.
Yeah, one thing I noticed is that they quickly, when you get in, what they do is they attach your destiny and your identity to the place.
Yes.
And so it becomes easy. I mean, it's instead of going through the work of figuring out and seeking God of who you are and of what you should be doing with your life and what direction to go, it's like they give it to you. And then, I guess your imagination takes over and romanticizes it all.
Yes. Yes, that's absolutely right. And I even heard Keckle in this morning's service, which I only heard it at the beginning because I was recording it, but I was turning the volume down. He said something, he was referring to someone, said, oh, they got saved in this church. And I was like, that is such a messed up way to think. Like, I don't even know where to begin with pulling that apart. But that's how you start to think was, well, I wasn't, because they doubted. If you claimed to be a Christian before you came to them, I even wrote that to Brian. I said I wasn't really a Christian, and he didn't understand that. I had told several friends that, like, I wasn't really a Christian before I met them, because, this and that, and my hair, my this, and makeup, and dingle bobs hanging from my ears and everything. So, yeah. And then, so you have romanticized it. Like, we are on a journey from South Florida with our 2 little babies, driving all the way up to Graham, and dreams of what was going to happen there. And it was not what you think. It was not what you think at all. I'm sorry, Erik. I'm adding this in after the fact. I never answered your question about Blumenthal. He's no longer in the organization. I believe, and I think I was starting to say, we went up to the school, and then he and his wife had come to the school, I want to say, during 1992. I don't think it was 93, but it could have been. Doesn't matter. And he was very standoffish to those of us who had been under his ministry. And it just felt like something's off here. And the next thing you know, they're not married anymore. And the next thing you know, she's sitting on the wall to talk to somebody else. I mean, that's how fast it happens. So back to getting to Bible school. You don't even care that you're destitute. You're so poor that we just ate tortillas every night because I had flour and I think butter maybe or oil. I had flour and oil and sometimes I'd sprinkle cinnamon sugar on it or something, but it was all about keeping the girls fed, and they were little enough that, and there were people that helped us in the church that were a blessing to us. Some of them did it without permission. You weren't supposed to give anything to anyone without permission. And one lady came up to me with a whole big box of formula. And I was a rule follower. I was a rule follower. So I was like, so was this cleared with Reverend Keckle? And she just looked at me and I knew she hadn't. But I wasn't going to call her on it and say, oh, I can't take it then. I just thought, well, I asked, and she said,
how crazy would that have been if you let your children go hungry?
Exactly.
Reverend Keckle
didn't
say.
Yes. And you're just poor as dirt. Poor as dirt.
During that time, when you thought like that, can you explain to us a little? I think each person in their own mind, they justify it different ways. But in your mind, what was the justification for like, hey, I know I don't really see this in the Bible and different things like that, and I have a relationship with God, but like, what was your reason in your mind why it was acceptable that you had to ask Keckle, you had to ask leadership before you could do something like even accept food if you needed it? And because that really is, it's almost funny because there's people who are not even Christian and they know the gist of Jesus and his story, and they would be like, what? They were like,
yes. That's a good question for the ages, I think. Of course, once you get to school and you're in orientation, they try to make it all sound reasonable. It's reasonable. We have these rules because, Davis would say, you make the rules. There have been issues. So all it takes is somebody to do some boneheaded thing in the eyes of Davis that's it. And you see that in Keckle. Oh, that's it. We don't like that you did this, so the whole class has to do a book report. It's just lashing out and making... That's a tactic that's used in military ranks and everything. Like, okay, go ahead, go take care of him. He's the one. He's the reason why you have to read this stupid book and do a book report on it. Because I don't like him. So Davis, pretty much that's what we were told was, that's the long and short of it, is that you people made these rules. There's a reason why, someone took advantage of something, so guess what? Now you have to ask. And, some people were having 4 kids over for a birthday party. Oh my, It's heavens to murder.
At what point in time did the rules did they kind of hit you in the face where you're like, okay, this is like a very, like, at what point in time did you feel controlled?
I wish I could take credit for having felt that. I mean, of course there's a part of you that does, because it's not natural.
Yeah.
But again, you're in this environment and you've been pruned for it for how many years before even getting there? And for me, I was going to do whatever, like, if this is a godly endeavor, then who am I to question it? I was telling your wife this. I didn't put it in our interview because I was just jaw-jacking with her. But I I told her how, well, she told me about Wayne Cantrell forgiving her debt for the money for the car and all.
Oh yeah, that was
And
very kind.
yes, and I said to her that when I first got to school, we lived in Puyallup. We would go down into Ording. There was this little dinky laundromat there, and I would bring our stuff down there on Saturday mornings sometimes. And the church wasn't open to the public then, so it wasn't like we were out doing that stuff on a Saturday. We were taking care of errands and typing notes and stuff. And I was sitting there, and we were just told, in orientation, that you don't fellowship without permission. Of course, fellowship isn't defined necessarily, but I was sitting there in the laundromat, and Wayne Cantrell was sitting, across the way. And it was just small talk, like, hey, how are you? I'm Sister Pelfrey, blah, blah, blah. I just got here. And he was saying who he was and all. And then on my way home with my laundry, I was like, oh my God, I broke the rules. I broke the rules.
Oh no.
So I need to tell on myself. I came home, went to the phone, called Keckle, blubbering. I was crying. I was so upset. Like, here we just get to school and I'm already messing up. And I said, I was down at the laundromat and I was talking with Wayne, Brother Cantrell, and I didn't, mean to be breaking any rules or fellowshipping and all. And, he absolved me and I went on my way. But I was extreme rule follower. Extreme.
Okay.
I'm probably still that way.
Well,
Like, I follow the rules. But
they say, and I'm not trying. Hopefully this doesn't sound sexist or something, but they say that usually women have a better time being disciplined and following rules than men.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. That's why I did really well in the Air Force. I moved up through ranks really, really quick and earned top awards and stuff. I just did what I was supposed to do. It's funny because my granddaughter was watching a show. I don't know if you ever heard of Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay. So years ago, she was watching an episode where the oldest son joins the army. And as he's in the army, he's spent his whole life being just a menace, doing everything to get out of stuff. And he was suffering for it in boot camp. So there was a point where he just realized, I just need to turn my brain off. And when he turned his brain off and just did exactly what the drill instructor said, he excelled. And he was awarded highest honors because he did so well. And in fact, the drill instructor would bring other people in to see him, to see his star recruit. And he would tell him to march, and he would march into a wall and just keep marching into the wall until he told him to stop. And the guy said, the one drill instructor said to the other one, how did you get him to do that? And he's like, he just does whatever I tell him. And whatever he told him to do, he did outstanding. And when I saw that episode, I said, that was me. That was absolutely me. I was going to just turn off my brain and follow the rules. There was no critical thinking. There was no matching it up against the Bible, because to do that, to me, felt like I was going against God. If I'm looking in God's word to judge the rules that are supposedly from God, then aren't I then questioning God? Which is what they would tell us.
Oh wow!
So you're in a conundrum.
See how crafty and subtle that is.
Yep.
They literally make the will of God and their will synonymous. But
Yep.
it's something that's so subtle, you hardly notice.
Yep. And for each thing that you accept, okay, you can't have all these kids over for a birthday party or something, and which seems like maybe, and I don't know what the rules are now, but back then there were a lot of us at the school, and my girls had a lot of friends. And I'll never forget one time calling the office and saying, yeah, I need to get permission to have um, so these different girls over for a birthday party. And Darren Butler at the time was in the office. He's no longer in the organization. He said, "Oh, sister, you can only have two." I said, "Please." Like these girls, these three girls are sisters. I can't just invite one of them. These kids don't understand. I don't want them to feel like
Wow.
everything is just and so fun. I almost cried. I was begging, "Please, please, can you do something?" Because otherwise I might, I don't want to not have a party for them. It's all these kids really had because it wasn't like now where they can go to games and do different things. It wasn't allowed. It wasn't allowed. So when I saw parents that would do certain things, I was like, ooh, they're living on the edge, like
Wow.
they must be
What would you
almost
say
on their
to
way
somebody?
out.
What would you say to somebody who? And one thing that I hear a lot of when somebody I get in their mind complains about the rules or something like that, they would say, "Well, anywhere that you go, that there's
Yes.
rules and there's a standard that must
Yep.
be followed."
Yep.
What would you say to someone who's just coming into NTCC and they feel that way? They feel like you're complaining. They feel like you're giving a sob story about the rules. What would you say? Why is this wrong in a church or in this setting?
Well, I definitely don't have a sob story because I did it. I was like premier rule follower. I had no problem at the time because I thought it's what God wanted. So I would say that's a very difficult thing to bring someone to that place. I don't think I could convince someone with my words about that
Okay,
because I really
fair enough.
believe, like all of us, it's why we do these things, these interviews, the videos, writing. You leave comments on YouTube. It all is the little things that get piled up, and sometimes you don't even know it that it's happening until that day when your eyes open and it all comes flooding in like, oh my God, I should have, way back then, I should have gotten out of this place. I should have.
Yes.
And so, yes, we were told that. We were told the military has rules, and how can you argue with that? But why, if we're saying we believe this one version of the Bible, and if I don't see it in there, how are you convincing me that it's in there? And when is the point when someone else will realize too that all the convincing is just lies for
Yes.
manipulation? And I that is the whole dynamic of a cult, is that it is not forced. No, Keckle and Kinson and Davis just say, you can just leave. You can just leave anytime. No, you can't. No. I think there's a therapist out there whose book I read. I think it was called Take Back Your Life or something like that when I first got out. Because we didn't leave thinking we were in a cult. If anybody reads the letter Brian sent to Davis and the Keckles, you would see that very plainly. He trips over himself trying to say positive things to Davis. We did not know that until we got out and you start analyzing. Why did we stay in? Like, did we see these signs earlier? And you start talking and then you start reading books and you're like, wow, I was in a cult. Bona fide. Doesn't matter what they say. Doesn't matter if their version of cult is just like the biggies, the Mormons, the JWs, Scientology.
Yes.
They too use the Bible in some form to coerce and to lure people in.
Yeah, I think and Sarah, she had said something really good in one of her comments one time, and it was about Jim Jones, and he preached the Bible, and
Mm-hmm.
and he and as a matter of fact, my grandmother, she, before I even understood who he really was, I remember that I guess it was when he started, uh, you know, going evil, but or at least it became obvious. And he was preaching, and he was really popular at one time. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people were going to him. He was claiming he could heal them, and he had powers and all this. And so and after he got people hooked, and they, it was seemed more like a personality cult. And then they were open to doing whatever that he suggested, whatever he said, to where it was,
It's insidious. If you
yeah,
really see, that's why I think so many of us can look now in on a service anywhere and pick it out. And it can be the subtlest thing that you mention, like, oh, he said this one thing. Um, like for me, I had a problem with what Keckle said recently about the harem and about, yeah, even if they're abused, look where they get to live and look who they get to
yeah,
serve, as if they're running around the palace just having a good old time. It wasn't that. He's so disingenuous. And I think it's all these little things he sticks in there. He says it plainly. He'll say, even if I'm a cultist, you have to respect me.
yep,
Even
yep.
if this or that is true. He said it
He
recently.
said,
He said, no
yep, he
matter
said,
what,
even if
there's no
I'm a
reason.
hypocrite,
There's no reason to
yep,
leave. Let me go inform. Somebody needs to go inform Cherie and Streeter and the Crawford's little step granddaughter. Yeah. So what if you were molested? So what if you were abused? There's no reason to leave the fellowship. No, that is not. That's just not a thing. I've probably gone
so
way
so
off and straight off from where your questions were. I'm sorry.
oh, no, but all this dialogue is very helpful. And so one thing that you mentioned about it's a when I was looking through the comments that people from the church were making to my wife Michaela
Oh,
for her interview,
man.
and one of the common things that people were saying was, hey, nobody made you stay, or you can always leave, and this and that. But kind of like you were saying, peer pressure is a very powerful tool. And I would say there's so many things in this life that are literally invisible, but they keep a restraint on us. And I think a good example is the law. Like, what keeps us from doing a lot of things that we might want to do?
Yep.
It's it's the law that, because if I do this, there's a consequence, or I'm going to jail. Now you can't see the law, you can see evidence of it, but it's invisible. But it keeps this whole society, for the most part, held together. And so the peer pressure in that place, it's like an invisible fence. And so I just wanted to know, when was the first time that you realized, like, I can't leave? Because a lot of times you don't know that you're being held captive until it's time to leave, or
Yeah,
until
we
you
did
think
not.
about it and you desire it.
Yeah, I would say the whole time, especially we were up in Graham. I mean, we left Graham at one point to go to Pittsburgh to start a church. And you are so focused on just reaching people and building something, growing something. And once you get out there, you are out from under a lot of the rules. There still are rules, but then you come back. We came back. Um, we had issues with my youngest daughter started having grand mal seizures. Brian was having some health issues, and so we came back after 3 years, and then I finished school, and so the rules were still in place. The rules were still the same, and you had been out in a place where you didn't have to worry about the rules, and now your kids are older and it affects them differently. And I wish I could say, I mean, there's all these psychologists out there and therapists and books and documentaries about how cults work. And to me, it shows you how. I'll look at a video. Someone sent me a video today of this terrible preacher. I couldn't believe what he was saying. I'm like, well, why do I not believe it? We've heard the same stuff in NTCC. And yet, why are those people sitting there like this guy didn't just rip them a new one? And for no reason other than he's cruel and mean. And I don't know. I never, while I was in Graham, thought about, oh, I hate these rules, or I really counted everything as, well, it's the man of God, and he knows what he's doing. Up until we had the split. And when Dennis's brother-in-law, Hugh Virgo, stood up in the service on December 20th, 2003, and I know that because that was my daughter Diana's birthday, she and Brian were sitting right in front of him. He stood up. I was on the other side of the chapel. I don't even know what he said. He stood up, he pointed. Davis was up there on the stage. And then he walked out and some brethren with him. I was like, what? No one knew what happened. No one knew. I can't even tell you what happened afterwards, like right afterwards. Did we do anything? Did we pray? Did we just have church? It was shocking. But what was more shocking was what happened after. And Davis, you could tell, like, the life went out of him a bit because Dennis was his golden child. So here is our opportunity to sit back, and all of the attention is off of us in the congregation or as ministers. Though Kekel did begin to take on that role even in like soul winning meetings that we would have. He was mean to people. And this was right around the same time where you had Kekel getting up in a Saturday morning thing. The whole chapel's filled with people to go out soul winning, knocking on doors rather. And he gets on a guy who said, "Sir, my wife's going to need a partner today because I have to go fix our car." And they had a newborn baby, so you could understand this. And Kekel said, like he was humiliating him, that he was putting his car before going to knock on doors. That was one of the first times I have to honestly say, like, that's gross. Like within myself, I really felt for them because you have to get permission to begin with to ride back and forth to church with someone. Now you have a baby in a car seat too. And I could tell everyone sitting there was appalled that he was absolutely humiliating this guy in front of all these people. Not just ministers, but some church members and stuff. And yet we all knew the Kekels were probably going to go home, have a little lunch and some coffee from their highfalutin coffee machine, and maybe go watch their son play football or soccer or something. Where they would, of course, invite people to church, right? Yet they never seemed to. They never seemed to. So that is something that now that you ask that was probably a little crack where I was really appalled. Then we had the Dennis split. And then Davis and Olson and Kekel and George Jordan, all began this campaign to make it seem like, Davis said it plainly, that God shielded his eyes for some reason for all this. That was God's master plan, was to shield his eyes from what was really going on with Dennis. Yet we heard from people that Kekel knew and others brought it to Davis's attention. Kekel bragged about it recently in a service. I knew what was going on. Really? What did you do? Oh, I told pastor, but he blah blah blah. Okay, so then you just acquiesced. You knew this guy was a bad player, and you just went along with the big oaf, who that guy didn't do anything either. Davis, he didn't do anything.
Well, but here's the thing: is that's the culture of that place. Is that you can't tell the pastor anything. Like you're not you're you can if you want to, but in their mind they're so high and they're so infallible
Yep.
that it's just like you're lower than them. So they don't take any of your advice. There's nothing valuable that you have to offer.
No.
Um,
No, and if you're a
so
smart person, if you have critical thinking, I think that's why Davis eventually he had enough of Brian, because Brian was a thinker. He was a thinker, and he read his Bible and he thought about stuff. And when it came time that we saw stuff going on in Virginia and we brought it to his attention, Davis made it clear all through the years that he did not like people who were smart. He derided them all the time because he was a big oaf who sat around in his richness and luxury, didn't do squat. Everybody did it for him. They did everything else for him. And if you went up to his house, it would be lounged out. And I've said this before, like Nero, just laying there, barking orders at people who were bringing him stuff, doing everything for him. The guy didn't go out. He didn't go out knocking on doors. He didn't go out winning souls. Well, my job is to impart the word of God. Well, what are all these people doing out in the local churches? They're doing that. They still have to set up. They still have to do things. They still have to go and invite people to the church show. I mean, Davis, he even had the building crew up there in Graham during the time when there was the boom of all the buildings going up. They weren't allowed to walk from place to place. They had to run. If he was out there, he would yell from his car for them to be running. What are you walking for? Run. It's like, reminds me of these, I'm sorry, like a white plantation owner.
yep.
It's the sense you got. I remember one time when we lived in Graham, we lived across from the Faustos and the Olsons, and it was July 4th, and all the little kids in the neighborhood wanted to. I think I was teaching them a song, like "You're a grand old flag, you're a high fine flag," blah blah blah, and so they got out a wagon, and I had a bunch of children's church decorations and stuff. So we decorated a wagon with red, white, and blue, and they wanted to have a parade. These are little kids, plus my daughters, just little kids. The Fausto kids, I think the Butler little son, and my girls, and there may be a few others. And they said, we want to have a parade. So we walked up and down the road there that ran alongside the dorms. What was that, 210th or whatever? I don't know what that road is. And we went to, this was my decision, and what a dumb one. So we went walking. Nathaniel and Fausto wanted to, have the men in the office see them with their decorated wagon, and I agreed. So we went over there, knocked on the door, and they sang or yelled out "Happy 4th of July." And it was Darren Butler at the time, which he's gone. And he's like, "Sister, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "What?" The kids just wanted to, no, we can't, pastor will not be happy about this, like wasting time like this. I was like, okay. Like, we were taking them away from the Lord's business. These little kids who just wanted to wish them happy 4th of July. And then we,
Wow.
with the tuck head, he tried to say it in a low way so that they weren't put off, but they wanted to know why they couldn't see the other men who were in the office to wish them a happy 4th of July. So I just said, oh, they're just busy right now. Sometimes it's little things like this that children remember when they get older. And they look around and survey the landscape of people in the corporation. And all these little things come to their mind, and they don't want to be around it. And we went, then the spirit of it was lost. We just kind of brought our clunky little metal wagon back down the road, bumpity, bumpity, bump, and we try to distract them doing something else. But that's how he was, almost like he enjoyed watching people. When he said jump, they say how high. And
that is totally against the spirit of Christ. It's okay. So Luke 22, chapter 22, verse 25 through 27. Jesus tells his disciples that the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But he's basically telling them, but you don't do that. Let the greater one among you come as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves.
Yep.
For whoever is greater, he's the one that reclines at the table. And he's like, or one who is greater, the one who reclines at the table or the one who serves?
Yep.
And he's like, but I am among you and I'm serving. And so this was God. And he put forth this example. And it literally is just total anti-Christ, really, that whole attitude, that pompous.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And at the time, Dennis was emerging at a certain point as the new golden boy. And what's interesting is this person that was telling me the story about when Dennis was in charge of a bunch of the brethren at that pen company in St. Louis, and he was still in Bible school and all. I heard from a couple people that he wasn't nice to them. And he was saying, so he was relating how he thought the direction of the organization should go, and also that he thought doing the dispensation chart was stupid, which I do not disagree with him on that either.
Yeah, seriously.
And so this person was a lot like I was and told on him. Like he's saying stuff about the organization. This person was young, as most of them were who were there for school. And so Blumenthal at the time was the one over St. Louis as the pastor and over the Bible school there. And so he pulled him out for a semester. He pulled him out of the... Now, I've been told that Blumenthal had aught against Dennis because Dennis was emerging as the new golden boy, whereas he used to be. So that it wasn't hidden that he wasn't a fan of Dennis. So then I asked the person, so what happened? Clearly this is an early time before he's even married or graduated. Like, was he kept, like, that's heresy to go against what Davis is doing in the organization. It's not on normal terms, but for the group. And the person told me that, oh no, Davis let him back in. He let him back in the school. It's like, interesting. There were signs of things all along, whether it was Davis being in a car with Dennis and telling some young man to get a vasectomy. And he goes and does it, even though he and his wife had said, well, we want to have children. Well, the man of God is saying it will be disrupted to the ministry. And, I've heard Keckle try to backpedal on all that, and he's lying. He's lying because there's too many who have had them. They had them, then they got them reversed, then they had it again. It's like snip, 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 snip. And all for what?
So the image that you paint of Davis, it is way different from, and I've never seen Davis. I think I've seen a picture of him before, but I've never met him. But even from people who were my age, who when they were younger and they could remember him, let me tell you some of the things that I've heard, and I'm not exaggerating or trying to be funny. So I've heard, a lot of people would talk about how powerful of a man of God he was, how that when he preached, you could just feel the Spirit so much. I've heard people say that when he preached, it was like, and people were praising and worshiping. It was like you could see blue smoke coming up from the ground,
Oh
and you could
my.
just all the I've had a person who we were friends. He said that God personally told him that Davis was the greatest was the greatest man of God during his time that lived on the earth during his time. And so, for how people, their lives have been changed from things that he said, from things that he's preached. They said the way that worship service felt and the excitement, they said it made you so excited just to be a Christian. And the way that he spoke and the way that he helped people, he would help people buy homes, and how giving that he was. And yes, he was stern and he had a particular way about him. But at the end of the day, he was so mightily used by the Holy Ghost. They said that when he would say something to you, you knew that it wasn't even him. They said you knew it was God. If he told you, hey, you're going to Timbuktu, you didn't even have to ask because God told you you're going to Timbuktu. So, what would you say to? I'm sure a lot of people feel the way that I'm describing right now. What would you say? Why is your experience so different from theirs? Like, what would you say that their experience is invalid, or it wasn't real, or what do you think is going on there?
That's a good question. What's interesting is there probably would have been a time when I would have said some of that too. Not all of it. Some of it is a bit much. But, you
I
know,
was like, is this a superhero? I was like,
well, but here's the thing. Again, it's all these little things that set you up. So you get to school and you hear from Joe Olson that you are God's elite special forces. You're gonna go out and win the world for Christ. Then Keckle tells you in a class that Davis is the first man up before the throne of God. He told us that many times. So you're like, whoa, that's quite a declaration. And you just take it in. You just take it in like a doofus. And then the thing, though, is once you do get, I won't say close to them, but they allow you to come to their house for fellowship or to go buy groceries for them. I'm going to allow you to go buy us groceries and bring them to me. You start to see things, but they're just things you see. You're not processing it yet. You know what I mean? It's just all
yeah,
being taken in, but it's not, it's like waiting in an inbox to be processed or something. And then I was saying before, and I cut myself off, was when the whole thing happened with the split. I think one of the next services, Davis was up there, and George Jordan got up and was talking about how Pastor was an apostle. His ministry was just like the apostles that walked with Christ on the earth. He was saying some outrageous things that were, I know I was sitting there like, what? What are we saying here exactly? And he just went over the top with it. He was going to be one of the 4 and 20 elders, from the
I
book of
think they're already
Revelation.
chosen.
And it's like, wow. And yet this guy doesn't seem to do anything except ride around in his SUV, pull in our driveway and honk. His wife pulls in our driveway and honks, and you're supposed to come running out. They really behave more like some king from the Renaissance years that bring me, woman I thirst, or where's my goblet. It's it's what can you do for me? What are you doing to give to me? And now here he's been elevated to that status. Well, I would say that was another crack for many of us. Like, no, no, I don't
What do you
believe
think
that.
motivated people to elevate him that hard? Like, so for someone to go up there and give a grand speech about how he is the highest of the, the elders and all this, what do you think motivated people to do
I
that? Do you think
think
that they were
it's
coerced to
just
do that? Or
pastor worship. Like, I believe Georgia Jordan really believed it at the time. If you heard him, you'd say, like, that guy adores this guy. And he always behaved that way. So here you have Dennis, who was his top notch guy, who was out there, who Davis said to everybody, even to someone like Ashmore, you should be doing what he's doing, and then you'll have results. Because I was told by some people from these early days that Dennis, if there was which I find appalling, I never liked the whole idea of a soul winning competition. I don't know. That I just have a problem with that. I always did, but whatever. And this person said, oh, yeah, he would always bring like 20 or 30 people to church at one time. So as he began to do this, and he would go to the various servicemen's homes, and then he was put as an overseer, and he was the one who would come in and set up programs that should be followed. And it always, I've heard from people from all walks of life that were church members in a church where Dennis came in as the pastor or as the overseer. And I don't find many that found him to be lovely person, charismatic. He mostly, even the first time I met him in person, was to just stare at you, like Davis. It's something they learned to do. I'm looking through you now. I see you. I see everything you're thinking. And you're supposed to walk away and feel like you've been in the presence of greatness. And Davis did this, and he would lay prostrate on the stage like, oh, God kept his eyes from it. And that whole next conference, that's all we heard was, because that was the buzz, was Dennis and the crowd leaving. And everybody was shook up. We were shook. We didn't know what was what. There was preaching about the enemy and who's on the Lord's side and all that blah, blah stuff. And you realize after a while that he didn't know because he didn't want to know. Because that guy was helping him get what he wanted, which was money, people in churches, and buildings. There are probably as many reasons why there was an element or a group of people that elevated him to such a high place. And I think part of it is probably just people wanting to be a part of a fantastical move of God for our time, because all you ever hear about is these old time revivals. There was never a new time revival. Why is that? And so there were people who heard the things that were said about Davis, and Olson was a big time liar and enabler. He knew the real beginnings of this group, but he lied. And Olson uses this tactic where he tries to make it seem like God woke him up at 3 a.m. and he wrote it down on a piece of paper, and God told him such and such, and now he's telling you. And then you have, even in the service I heard from October 1st, that's what Keckle did with Kinson in the morning service. He's like, oh, yeah, I had something similar. And they try to make it seem like it's God orchestrating everything. It's God that is speaking through and moving through this great man of God who really just knows how to psychologically psych you out. But so you have this facade is just crumbling about Davis, because no matter what was said, we knew he wasn't living a life except one of luxury and of people adoring him, opening the door for him, doing everything for him. Same with the Keckles, the same thing. And so to come and say, well, God shielded my eyes, it wasn't good enough. I think everyone at that conference was like, this wasn't good enough. Whatever they were trying to smooth over, it wasn't working. They then called in they had a conference up in Graham of just the pastors and their wives. And just trying, I don't know if they were trying to suss out who else might still be one of Dennis's gang or something. Because I wouldn't be surprised if he left back some moles. But it was a crazy time. It was a time of shaking up. And it's the time in 2004, right at the beginning and the end of 2003, when Sarah DeYoung and her husband came